Welcome to NewBlacksGhana, and welcome to Ghana, the gateway to Africa, a nation with a legacy that has inspired leaders, visionaries, and icons from across the world. Today, we'll journey through history to uncover why Ghana has always been a pioneer in Africa, and why every member of the African diaspora should visit this incredible country at least once in their lifetime. It all began on March 6, 1957, when Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence from colonial rule. Led by the visionary Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's independence ignited a wave of liberation movements across the continent. It was more than a political victory. It was a declaration of Pan-African unity and hope. Nkrumah's call for African unity resonated far beyond Ghana's borders, attracting leaders and icons of the global Black community. Let's explore the footprints left by these historical figures in Ghana. In 1957, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. traveled to Ghana to witness its independence celebrations. This trip was transformative for him. King described it as a powerful reminder of the universal struggle for freedom and equality. At Independence Square, where Ghana declared its freedom, King was inspired to intensify the civil rights movement back in the United States. It's remarkable to think that this small country played such a pivotal role in shaping the global fight for justice.
Came the continual agitation, the continual resistance, so that the British Empire saw that it could no longer rule the gold coast. And they agreed that on the 6th of March, 1957, they would release this nation. This nation would no longer be a colony of the British Empire. This nation would be a sovereign nation within the British Commonwealth. And all of this was because of the persistent protest, the continual agitation on the part of Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah and the other leaders who worked along with him and the masses of people who were willing to follow. So that day finally came. It was a great day. The week ahead was a great week. They had been preparing for this day for many years, and now it was here. People coming in from all over the world. They had started getting in by the 2nd of March. 70 nations represented. They come to say to this new nation, we greet you. And we give you our moral support. We hope for you God's guidance as you move now into the realm of independence. From America itself, more than 100 persons, the press, the diplomatic guests, and the Prime Minister's guests. No, it was a beautiful experience to see some of the leading persons on the scene of civil rights in America on hand to say greetings to you as this new nation was born. Look over. To my right is Adam Powell, to my left is Charles Biggs, to my right again is Ralph Bunche, to the other side is Her Majesty's First Minister of Jamaica Manning, Ambassador Jones of Liberia, all of these people from America, Mordecai Johnson, Horace Mann Bond, all of these people just gone over to say we want to greet you, and we want you to know that you have our moral support as you grow. Then you look out and see the Vice President of the United States. You see A. Philip Randolph. You see all of the people who have stood in the forefront of the struggle for civil rights over the years, coming over to Africa to say we bid you Godspeed. This was a great day, not only for Nkrumah, but for the whole of the Gold Coast. There then came Tuesday, December the 5th. Many events leading up to it. That night, we walked into the closing of Parliament, the closing of the old Parliament which was presided over by the British Empire, the old Parliament which designated colonialism and imperialism. Now that Parliament is closed. That was a great sight and a great picture and a great scene. We sat there that night, just about 500 able to get in there. People, thousands and thousands of people waiting outside, just about 500 in there, and we were fortunate enough to be sitting there at that moment as guests of the Prime Minister. At that hour, we noticed Prime Minister Nkrumah walking in with all of his ministers, with the justices of the Supreme Court of the Gold Coast, with all of the people of the Convention People's Party, the leaders of that party. Nkrumah came up to make his closing speech to the old Gold Coast. It was something old now passing away. The thing that impressed me more than anything else that night was the fact that when Nkrumah walked in, and his other ministers who had been in prison with him, they didn't come in with the crowns and all of the garments of kings, but they walked in with prison caps and the coats that they had lived with for all of the months that they had been in prison. Nkrumah stood up and made his closing speech to Parliament with the little caps that he wore in prison for several months and the coat that he wore in prison for several months and all of his ministers round about him. That was a great hour. The whole Parliament passing away. And then at 12 o'clock that night we walked out. As we walked out, we noticed all over the polo grounds almost 500,000 people. They had waited for this hour and this moment for years. As we walked out of the door and looked at that beautiful building, we looked up to the top of it. There was a little flag that had been soaring around the sky for many years. It was the Union Jack flag of the Gold Coast, the British flag, you see. At 12 o'clock that night, we saw a little flag coming down. And another flag went up. The old Union Jack flag came down and the new flag of Ghana went up. This was a new nation now. A new nation being born, and when Prime Minister Nkrumah stood up before his people out in the polo ground and said, we are no longer a British colony, but we are the free, sovereign people. All over that vast throng of people, we could see tears. And I stood there thinking about so many things. Before I knew it, I started weeping, and I was crying for joy. But I knew about all of the struggles and all of the pain and all of the agony that these people had gone through for this moment. And after Nkrumah had made that final speech, it was about 12:30 now, and we walked away. And we could hear little children, 6 years old, and old people 80 and 90 years old, walking the streets of Accra, crying, freedom, freedom. They couldn't say it in the sense that we said. Many of them don't speak English too well, but they had their accents, and it could ring out freedom. And they were crying it in a sense that they had never heard it before. And I could hear that old Negro spiritual once more crying out, free at last, great God Almighty, I'm free at last. They were experiencing that in their very souls, and everywhere we turned, we could hear it ringing out from the housetops. We could hear it from every corner, every nook and crook of the community. Freedom, freedom. This was the birth of a new nation. This was the breaking loose from Egypt.
In 1964, Malcolm X visited Ghana, a nation that had become a symbol of liberation and hope for many African Americans. The country had gained independence from British colonial rule in 1957 under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, becoming the first African country to do so. This achievement resonated deeply with Malcolm X, who was drawn to Ghana's revolutionary spirit and Nkrumah's visionary leadership. During his stay in Ghana, Malcolm X engaged with a diverse group of African freedom fighters, intellectuals, and political leaders.
When Malcolm X came to Ghana, the African Americans who were there, we gathered around him like his children. And he liked me, and we liked each other.
I met Malcolm X at my mother's house in Ghana. My mother went out and bought about 6 chickens, and she rarely fried chicken. And I was almost sorry to meet Malcolm X because the chicken was so good and I had to share it with him. But the thing about Malcolm is, for a person of his stature, for me to ask a question and for him to think about it and then come back with an answer, it captured my heart, and his answers were so phenomenal.
We wanted to meet so he could tell us what was going on in the States and what his plans were. And we found out that his quest was to find an African government that would take the United Nations Genocide Convention and make a charge against the United States.
African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices manifest every day against Negroes in this society.
This is Maya with me and our delegation who went into the American Embassy in Ghana to deliver our petition condemning the United States.
Have you had any commitments from any nations in Africa to support you?
I would rather not say at this time.
In fact, we couldn't get any African government to bring any charge against the U.S. because of the American money, the cash.
These interactions were pivotal in shaping his understanding of Pan-Africanism, the idea that all people of African descent should unite across national boundaries to address common issues such as racial oppression, economic exploitation, and cultural marginalization. He met with individuals like W.E.B, Du Bois, who had relocated to Ghana in his later years, and other influential figures who were actively involved in the continent's liberation movements. Malcolm X viewed Ghana as a beacon of Black empowerment and self-determination. The successful decolonization effort led by Nkrumah was a testament to the power of unity and resilience among African peoples. This experience significantly influenced Malcolm X's evolving vision for global Black unity. He began to see the struggle for civil rights in the United States as interconnected with the broader fight against colonialism and imperialism worldwide. Ghana's example inspired Malcolm X to advocate more vigorously for solidarity among people of African descent globally. He emphasized the importance of political and economic independence for Black communities everywhere. This perspective was reflected in his speeches and writings upon returning to the United States.
Question first. To my understanding, what Mr. Muhammad has said is that he wants freedom, justice, and equality for the Black people here in America, which you agree they don't have. If they did, you wouldn't have a race problem. And he says, if America cannot bring about freedom, justice, and equality for our people in this country, then America should allow us to leave. If we can't get along together, we should be allowed to depart and go someplace where we can set up housekeeping for ourselves. Then he says, if America doesn't want us to go back home among our own people, and at the same time they want to keep us here, since we can't stay here and get along together in peace, he says what America should do is separate part of the country and give us a section where we can live, and give us everything we need to get our particular section functioning independently, support us for 25 years until we are able to function independently in a society of our own, and in this way the problem will be solved.
Where he increasingly framed the civil rights struggle within an international context. Malcolm X's visit to Ghana reinforced his belief in the necessity of an international approach to the fight against racial injustice. It marked a turning point in his activism as he increasingly sought to connect the African American struggle for equality with broader global movements for freedom and justice.
Watch out for part 2 of Black American Icon to Ghana Past and Present. Please subscribe to New Blacks Ghana and share the video. Thanks for watching.